Welcome to Career Tools. This week, international relationships basics. Here we go. Folks, it's really hard to talk about relationships without giving a shout out to our Effective Relationships series of podcasts, 32 podcasts, which you can buy a part of to help you relate better to people whom you work with. If they're dominant and you're not, how to talk to them, how to do email, how to run meetings, how to be in meetings with them, everything you need to know to improve the way you communicate with the people around you. So Wendy, with this cast, we recur to something that is an important issue every effective communications conference, which is, people in other parts of the world are different.
Yes.
And the Wendy curve, we come back to the Wendy curve, which people just listen to it and they just feel totally cheated by modern media. There's just an amazing amount of misinformation.
Yeah.
And I could have a whole cast just about the word culture and how irritated I get by it. The idea that other people have cultures, but nobody thinks they have a culture where they are, but other countries' cultures deserve to be respected. And then the whole don't do X thing, right? We might insult somebody.
Yeah, don't show the soles of your feet. I mean,
really?
We'll go through it, but,
yeah. Yeah. This is only the first cast. This is the basics. We intend to provide some details on these ideas later in all parts of the world for everyone. So when you're traveling, you'll have some basic understanding. But too often, too many people think their entire trip is about observing all the cultural differences, so much so they forget to relate, they forget to connect, they forget to be themselves, they forget to do business. They just feel like they're in a minefield, a cultural minefield. You have to have a gift. You have to drink the tea. It's like, really? No, that's not the way. It's not the way it works. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of us. Give us the outline.
Okay, so culture is just habits, and anyone you deal with knows you're not from around here. Normal rules of courtesy apply, and be willing to apologize.
Yep. Okay. Culture is just habits. I cannot wait. I have been saying this for years, and actually culture is the wrong word. So walk us through this and make me happy.
Okay. So if you think of people in aggregate, all the people on the earth, we are remarkably similar. The things that are important to us, our families, our children having better lives, our jobs, being part of society.
Yes. Having friends, our addiction to food, clothing, and shelter, Our basic belief in our own safety.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
exactly.
Right? Applies to everybody, right? And there's the nature-nurture debate about why people are different. Twin studies show that two twins brought up in different families can still be remarkably similar, even though the families are different.
Right.
And yet there's huge differences within families where two children are brought up exactly the same way. My brothers and I are completely different, despite the fact that we had the same parents.
Yeah, they're rubbish.
We were in the same house.
Yeah,
they're rubbish.
They're rubbish.
And I'm
Absolutely,
awesome,
exactly.
And, my brother's idea of punctual is sometime in the next hour. You say 11 o'clock, and he thinks that means between 11:30 and 12. And yet my other brother, he hyperventilates if he's like a minute late, and yet they were brought up in the same
house. Yeah.
So all of these things people are different based on whatever, nature or nurture, but they're also very similar. And we all have a range of behavior, and it doesn't matter which country we're in. There's a range of behavior between the inhabitants of that country. People often say to me, do British people do X? And I'm like, well, I do, but I don't speak for 52 million people, because other people in Britain might be different. But on the other hand, we all have to eat, we all have to shelter, we all want other people, we all have relationships with other people.
Well, I remember very clearly being at a friend's house who had served time in Hawaii with me years ago, 35 years ago. And there was a comment made by a friend of mine who was coming to this party that, this is an American house and you don't have to take off your shoes. And I said, actually, in this house you do. And they said, that's not American culture. And I said, well,
Keeps my floors clean.
When I was growing up, we wore our shoes in our house. I have three brothers. All of us wore our shoes in our house. But there are times when we had to take our shoes off. And I had friends in my neighborhood that their parents made them take their shoes off, right? I think it had something to do with whether the parent was a clean freak or not. In the case of the person who lived in Hawaii, it was a function of the fact that in Hawaii, a lot of people did that. It wasn't necessarily a cultural thing like an Asian culture or Hawaiian culture or something else. This very Caucasian family started doing it, I think because the person who was responsible for cleaning the house liked the fact that the house stayed cleaner. And this person was very surprised. Oh, I thought everyone, you could wear your shoes in your house. It's a thing. It's a thing where I come from that Americans are gauche, if you will, gauche enough to wear their shoes in their house. Surely they know that it's way better for a clean house to leave your shoes at the door. And I'm listening to this entire conversation going, seriously? What I do when I go to any house, any person's home in the world, is I respect whatever it is they do. I don't blame it on where they're from. I just think this is how this person runs their house because luckily for them, they have freedom. They apparently own the property and they want to control their environment a little bit, which all of us kind of do. And it was a classic case of let's make this into a culture debate rather than into this is how this person likes to live his life. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And you made the point about we're remarkably similar. I know this is fairly common knowledge, but I'll just repeat it. I think I just saw something that 97, let me put it this way. It's somewhere between 95 and 100% of the genome that runs our lives genetically is identical.
Yeah.
And there's only a couple of percentage points.
Yeah, it's tiny. And it's something ridiculous like we are 3% different from dolphins.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you've made the point, right? We all need to eat. We all need to have shelter. We all want better for our children. You said that. We want friends. And by the way, that's a part of your social human drive, folks. Everybody has that. So we all are different and we all are the same, but your brain is trained to look for differences. The guy who invented the Palm software, as I recall, Trip Hawkins, wrote a book called On the Brain or On Brain Science or something like that. It's one of my favorite books of the last 5 years. And Tripp makes the point of how you walk into a room and if there's a tableau set up with 100 items, you're only given 5 seconds to look at it. You can't memorize all 100 items, but your brain takes a really good picture of it. If you walk back out and walk back in and they ask you, has something changed? The percentage of people who know that something has changed is very high, like 80-90% of people notice. They can't tell you what's changed, but something has changed because your brain is great at seeing patterns and seeing divergent things from the pattern. So we notice the differences and we call it culture, but that doesn't mean it's culture.
No, exactly. So we'll think about food for a second, because that's something that often call culture. So in France, they have croissants dipped in coffee, which I think is an awesome kind of breakfast.
Yes.
And in Spain, it's churros in hot chocolate, which is even better. In Nepal, it's a kind of rice pudding, a dessert made of rice and milk, which I didn't do for breakfast. But in Egypt, they have falafel, which is made of chickpeas, I think. And those are things that people think of as culture, but they're not. They're just food choices, and the habit
it's what you can grow.
Of what you have for breakfast. It's based on ingredients and the time and resources to make it.
Well, I know I'm getting us off track here, but I'll tell you, I got into a little debate about a year ago where the guy said, well, there's a central tendency in the world. And they said, no, there's not. We're all getting increasingly different. And I said, okay, I don't have science. I'm sorry, but I got to tell you something. 200 years ago, there were some foods no American ate. But now, thanks to jet engine travel and distribution systems and multinational corporations that think they can sell falafel in America, we get falafel. We
didn't have pasta as kids.
Well, look, I told somebody when I was a kid, pizza really didn't exist. I mean, there were pizza ovens in if you'll pardon the expression, Italian neighborhoods. But there was one pizza place in my town, and it wasn't very good, as I recall. And that was before Pizza Hut. And I know that Pizza Hut is not the end-all and be-all, folks. But things that are good spread. And, I've told people before, the world is tending to a central pattern. One example is professional greetings. I predict that in a couple of 100 years, everyone will simply be shaking hands. It addresses our issue of touching one another without putting our faces close together, simply because your faces, and if you're sick and so on, putting your sick germs around your face, right around somebody's eyes and nose and mouth, probably increases the chances for transmission of disease. And they simply couldn't believe it because they had been reading about kissing on one cheek or two cheeks. And I said, well, the only reason you're reading about it is because people notice it, but that doesn't mean it's going to be that way in 500 years. I mean, we don't bow to anyone anymore. And it used to be that, boy, if you saw the queen or the king, you better bow or your head might come off.
200 years ago, if you didn't curtsy, you got your head chopped off. But the Queen's official rules, which are on her website, that says if you meet the Queen, this is what you have to do, actually says now, if you don't want to curtsy or bow, that's fine. And she respects what you want to do.
Yeah. Okay, now we talked about food before, and the way you described it was something about sharing their choice for breakfast. Tell me that again, because that was really helpful.
So for breakfast, I have usually oatmeal, which I call porridge. But if somebody didn't share my breakfast choice, I wouldn't be insulted. If somebody said, I want chocolate and churros, and that's what I always have for breakfast, I'd be like, I'll try that. Sounds good. On the other hand, if they said, I'm going to have this and I won't have what you have, or I don't want what you have, it doesn't feel like a breakfast food for me, I wouldn't be insulted.
Yeah.
I'd think, if you don't want to try Country Nut cornflakes, you're missing out. But I'm not insulted. It's like, oh, that's your problem. And other people think the same thing.
Are you saying, essentially, I think what you're saying in a different way with a more realistic example, unless you specifically say to them, that's ugly and awful and no smart person would do that. You're not doing that. You're simply making a personal choice. But what we have done is created the idea that because breakfast choices and how one dresses and how one cleans one's house and how one interacts in public, those are culture issues, and culture is supposed to be so respected, and we're supposed to be so respectful about it, that if you choose a different breakfast choice, you are insulting them because it's a cultural difference. And that, folks, is ludicrous. It is absolutely ludicrous. What you call culture is really just habits, many of which are the same. They're expressed slightly differently, and you're not going to insult people unless you intend to insult them, a la John Wayne.
Exactly.
Okay, good. All right, so we don't intend to poke our finger in somebody else's eye, but that said, there are differences, and your point you made earlier was anyone you're going to interact with from a different culture, from a different country, from a different region or whatever, knows, because of all kinds of subtle things, you're not from around here.
Well, if I've heard it once, I've heard it a billion times. People say, you're not from around here in Texas, because I have an English accent.
Yeah, you can't really say that and get away with it, because really what people say, there are two types of people. Oh, you're not from around here. And then the other one is, well, you're not from around here, are you, honey? Kind of like, why don't you take that British accent and go right on back to that little island we won our independence from 250 years ago.
Yeah, there's not too many people like that.
No, there's not too many, but there are some, sadly. Yeah.
Yeah. And I when I first moved here, I had all sorts of fun. I couldn't get water to drink for the life of me.
Oh, folks, if you ever meet Wendy, you have to ask her to say water on Saturday. At Mamacitas in our little town in Fredericksburg, when Wendy lived in Fredericksburg near me, when she first moved to the States, we would go to Mamacitas and we'd have lunch, and she would say, water, please. And every single new waiter or waitress would say, excuse me. And she'd say, water. And they would do it again. It was a little play, a one-act play.
It was hilarious. And there's all sorts of things. I was in an Italian restaurant and I asked for something, and the guy came back and he said, the chef's a little confused. Not many people ask for pesto and tomato sauce on their pasta together. And no, that's not what I asked for. But he was like, he wanted to help me. I do all sorts of weird things, and I don't stop at stop signs, because I didn't know they actually meant stop. I don't believe in stop signs in parking lots because
it's private property.
They're private property, and if I go into Subway, I have to look at the sign to remember that they're not called pickles; they're called gherkins. But nobody cares. They just laugh at me.
Did you just do a malapropism? Did you just say they're not called pickles; they're called gherkins?
Yeah.
Have you been here so long? Yeah, it's the other way around. You've been here so long now. They're not called gherkins; they're called pickles. Which you should know, folks. If you don't know this, there's a famous building architecturally interesting building in the city of London. And by the way, folks, when people say the city in London, what they mean is the city of London, which is only 1 square mile. And that's where all the financial firms are today. Not all, but that's essentially what the market is there, is financial firms, banks and investment banks and so on. And there is a building there called the Gherkin because it is shaped very much like a pickle. But no one in Britain would know what the hell you were talking about if you said, I'm going to the pickle.
No, they wouldn't.
They just wouldn't, right? Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, nobody cares. Like they're like, oh, you're from England. I love your accent. Like, or where are you from? I love your accent. And then they try and help you. That's what people want to do. You and I went to China. We went to Shanghai, and we had exactly the same experience. We learned hello and please and thank you on the plane on the way over, and everybody was helping us out. I wanted to write parking lot in Chinese on the flip chart on the wall, and I showed him the word in Chinese, and I showed him what I'd written, and he just shook his head, and then he wrote it for me, and we didn't communicate. There were no words, but he wanted to help me, so he did.
Yeah.
If you think that the world outside your country is scary, and if you do the wrong thing you'll be put in jail, and it's not like that. If you're doing something nefarious, for sure. But I was in Moscow before the Berlin Wall fell, so after Glasnost, but before the Berlin Wall fell, and there were Secret Service agents following us around because we were British, but we did all sorts of stupid things because I was 17 at the time, and we didn't get arrested. They followed us around. We were fairly harmless, so they left us alone. And so, if you accidentally insult someone, if you do the wrong thing, if you go into a bank and ask for the wrong thing, if you go to a store and ask for the wrong thing, or you greet your hosts wrongly, they are human beings. They know you're not from around here, and they want to help you in the same way that you would if they came to your country.
Exactly. For those of you in America, let me say it this way. If you're an American and you meet someone from another country and they do something that shows that they're not aware of what you would call culture, what Wendy and I would call habit or custom, and you choose to believe that they insulted you, I'm going to tell you that you're the problem. Okay, I just got done talking to a client, a great guy, Dave Austin, just a wonderful guy, very successful. And Dave said, Mark, I thought the cast you did on Assume Positive Intent was meant just for me. And I told him the story about how I learned about it. And I said, I felt the same way. I said, boy, did I lay a lot of burdens down when I thought about assuming positive intent. And, we talked about the fact that you assume that, and if you feel insulted, it's a bit like what I would describe as the poisonous culture that exists in Washington, D.C. right now, at least insofar as how the media presents it to us, which is basically one guy says, I believe X, and the other one says, no, you believe something nefarious, dirty, and wrong, and that's why you're saying this, you want to do this thing. They attack each other's intents and motivation, which is absolutely a way to destroy any relationship, even a deep and personal one. The idea that someone comes to our country, someone comes to your country in Kazakhstan or Iran or Egypt or Greece or Spain or Portugal or China or Malaysia or Japan, and that you think they're trying to insult you, all you're doing is assuming negative intent. And you're the problem, not them. People don't go around intending to insult people. If you're listening to this, you travel in circles such that people don't go around trying to insult you. Or the one or two people at your workplace who do that are so hated by everyone, you ought not to assume that there are a lot more people in the world like that. And so you can't really accidentally insult someone. John Wayne said it. If you think I've insulted you, you're mistaken. Because if I've insulted you, you're going to know it. You don't get insulted. It's how they're poking you with a customs mistake, and you're getting insulted all by yourself. So in reverse, when you go to a country where you're not supposed to show them the bottom of your shoes, and then you inadvertently do because you crossed your legs the way, say, gentlemen in Britain and America and France often do, they're not going to be insulted you so much that you lose a deal. They're not. No. Now, look, it's as Wendy would say, it's better to know and attempt not to insult your hosts, But is it an unforgivable sin? Should you be on high alert all the time such that you can't be yourself? You're vibrating with a sense of, oh my gosh, I'm afraid I'm insult somebody? No. Unless you're a person who naturally insults people, when you go to a foreign country, you're not going to naturally insult anyone. You have to work at insulting people. Most people have pretty thick skins about that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Especially if they're doing international business, right? They already know.
Yes.
So, yeah. So normal rules of courtesy apply. So this is the next part. So wherever you live, you expect the normal rules of courtesy. And in Germany, when I lived in Germany, it's a famous thing that English people like to queue and will start a queue, even if there's only one person we know to start a line.
Yeah.
And in Germany, they don't really do lines. They just sort of do a mass. But you can't go around elbowing everybody and kind of pushing them out the way so you get to the front. That's, there might not be a perfect line, but it's not, you can't hit people. And that's courtesy, right? It's not culture. It's just courtesy.
Right.
Please and thank you are absolutely universal.
Yeah.
Smiling is universal.
The classic example of smiling is universal is when you're going to China and you're doing immigration there. And there are people who worry about it being a communist dictatorship, although they're certainly warming to capitalistic democracy, or at least the idea of capitalism, state-controlled capitalism. But when you go to the immigration line, and they speak English, and you hand them your passport, and there's a little button there. There's a little rating system there that you can just tap a button. It's a box maybe as big as a couple of Walkmans stuffed together, or a small jam box or something, and there's 4 faces on it. And there's a really sad red face, and there's kind of a neutral yellowish face, and there's a little green smiley face, and there's a big green smiley face. It's obvious. This is China. It's not like, only British people or only French people or only Egyptians or only Kiwis smile. Everybody smiles. And even immigration people in countries that are tightly controlled in terms of visas and so on, they still expect you to rate them with a smile.
Absolutely. And it's not smile written in Chinese. It's a picture of a face smiling.
It is a universal custom and standard of respect and being willing to grant dignity to another person is to smile at them and say, I care. The sight of your face brings me happiness. Mm-hmm. That is, yeah. I think what you're saying is you put the two together, normal rules of courtesy apply, and they understand that you're not from around here, is your hosts are going to forgive you.
Yeah, I remember my dad coming home. He hosted a delegation of Chinese airline staff. My dad worked for an airline at a buffet restaurant. So one of those restaurants where there's a table and all the food is laid out. You don't have to order from a menu. And the Chinese people took the plate and they put meat and vegetables and dessert all on the same plate, which, if you think about sweet and sour Chinese food, kind of makes sense. It's not what we would do as an English person, but it kind of made sense if you think about what they're used to. And my dad didn't say, you did that wrong. Like, take it back and do it properly. He said, do you have enough? And is it palatable? And are you having a nice time? And let's talk about something, how's your family and all those kind of things. It's not worth being insulted about. And then there is no insult, right? You just accept. That's one of the rules of, upper class courtesy, is that you never mention somebody's etiquette mistake.
Right. The worst type of etiquette is to point out somebody else's breach. That's not etiquette. Etiquette is both not trying to breach, and then also when you see a breach, not to make it known. And then if you assume for a moment that normal rules of courtesy apply from their perspective, you expect that, then the other side of it is, if your host is willing to overlook things, then if you're willing to apologize, you're going to be fine.
And apologies fall within the normal rules of courtesy. If you do something wrong, you are supposed to apologize.
Exactly.
It doesn't demean you. It doesn't make you smaller.
It doesn't make you smaller. You're not admitting fault and therefore the other person is superior. You're expressing regret that you erred in some way. And you're essentially smoothing over a bit of a bump. That's all. In fact, the choosing not to apologize is in fact attempting to be superior. Apologizing is not saying I'm inferior. Rather, apologizing simply says we're equals and I wish you to know that I'm aware that I did something that wasn't helpful, but you're not becoming inferior. Not apologizing attempts to make you superior. And we've talked about this thousands of times. The moment you try to make yourself superior, the other person often will attempt to do the same. And now you're in a battle. You're in an escalatory battle, which is not effective. It's rude.
And one of the things that people worry about is going to countries where women don't touch men that aren't related to them, and more than just the Middle East. But if you meet someone and just out of habit, you reach for them to shake their hand. If you're an American or a German or an English person, you probably do it, a business person, you probably do it out of sheer habit.
Right. You can't stop yourself.
Without even thinking about it. And if you reach out and she looks at you, or you look down and think, oh, I shouldn't have done that. You just say, I am so sorry, my mistake.
Yeah.
And I say, I'm so glad to meet you. If you think about yourself, if somebody did it to you, you just want the moment to be over.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to go, oh my gosh, you've insulted me, we can't possibly work together. When you just met somebody, you would just want the moment to be over. And if somebody gracefully apologizes and moves on, that's the best thing to do.
Yeah, I've said it many times. I say, forgive the stupid American, right? Yeah. Which is my way of changing the debate from the ugly American from the late 50s and early 60s. Good. Okay, so wrapping up, culture's just habits. Anyone you deal with knows you're not from around here, particularly if you sound like Wendy in South Texas. Mm-hmm. Normal rules of courtesy apply, folks. Courtesy is courtesy. It's not culture. It's not custom. Okay? And being willing to apologize. If you respect the rules of courtesy, and other people do as well, they won't point out your errors. And if you're willing to point out your own errors, you're essentially saying the small things that make us different can be overcome by the vast majority of things that make us the same. And I know many of you have said, oh, Mark, you go to interesting places and so on. Well, yeah, and I've been saying for years to people who have never been anywhere, the world is, everywhere I go, people are the same. And going is an awesome, wonderful thing. If your family can tolerate it, don't turn down an expatriate assignment. And we are different in some ways, but fundamentally we're all similar. And people want to connect with other people. And the better your network is, right? This comes back to our old, what's the only cast? What's the genesis of all other casts and career tools? And it is building your network. Yeah.
Absolutely.
If you connect with people on a human level with grace and dignity and respect for customs and for courtesy, the small bits of differences that people mistakenly call culture today will melt away.
Absolutely.
Good. Thanks, Wendy.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
That's it, everybody. Hope it was effective for you. That's what we shoot for every week. Come back next week.